I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a case study here on a house that just got sold in Shaughnessy. A lot of stuff went wrong. It ended up going into foreclosure, which I'll talk a little bit about the foreclosure process. I think I've told you guys before, in my early years as a realtor, I sold a fair number of foreclosures for TD Bank. Kind of cut my teeth in my first few years. So I'll give you the kind of the foreclosure process, how it works in Canada. But this particular sale that was reported a couple of weeks ago has to be the largest spread from original list price to what the final selling price was. Now, this home took 4 years to sell, 4 years on the market, 5 different realtors, originally listed for $40 million, 40, now had no business being listed at 40, but I'll give you the story on that, and then just sold 10 days ago in court foreclosure, as a foreclosure for 15 million, 15. So a spread of 25 million from the original purchase price to the final selling price 4 years later in foreclosure. And it's kind of a tale of a bunch of different things. I think maybe the seller calling a lot of the shots, an inexperienced seller slash developer. I think the seller was also calling a lot of the shots with pricing and marketing. That for sure, because he went through 5 different realtors. So obviously a lot of disagreements there, and realtors, in some cases he might have gotten rid of the realtor. In some cases, I think the realtor probably walked on this guy. So it's a myriad of things. I'll talk a little bit about foreclosure. I'll also just take one more stab here at the socialist liberal NDP that we're currently under federally here, because we are in wacko times right now. It's nuts. We've got a finance minister in Christina Freeland who has no background in finance. Only in Canada would we elect someone like that and put them in charge of a billion-dollar economy that couldn't run a lemonade stand. And they continue, these liberals, even though, you know, they were told, don't raise this capital gains tax. It's counterproductive. Any money you take in tax revenue will be offset 2 or 3-fold by a flight of capital. The other thing is they continue Christina Freeland continues to say that, you know, people that are flipping homes or businesses or stocks, should not be taxed less than what someone flipping burgers. So this shows how inept she is and inexperienced she is. The difference between taxable income, getting taxed at an income tax rate, versus capital gains tax. Capital gains tax is risk capital. In other words, in Canada, it's someone who has earned the money, been taxed on it at an extremely high tax rate, probably 50%. I'm in a 50% tax bracket. So if you earn $1 million, Revenue Canada takes half of that. You get $500,000, they take $500,000. You essentially work for the first 6 months for free in Canada to then pay yourself the other 6 months. So you take that million, you earn the $1 million, you get $500,000, and then you take that money and buy a business or buy some equities or buy some real estate or build a duplex or a fourplex or a small apartment building. But you are not guaranteed to make money like the liberals would say. Yes, if you know what you're doing and probably hold the asset long enough, you should make some money on it, some capital gains, hopefully. But a lot of times that's not the situation, and they're forced to sell early and take huge losses. This particular guy, which I'll go through here, I don't know all the circumstances here, but he went into foreclosure, and he definitely lost his shirt on this, and probably his pants as well. And, you know, in Canada here, we have what's called full recourse mortgages. So unlike in jurisdictions like the United States, if they foreclose on you, it's usually contained within the property that you're foreclosed on. In Canada here, for the most part, the banks can then go after you for your personal assets to make up any deficit from what the loan is that you've got outstanding to what they finally sell the home for. So this is something the liberals just don't get. When you're putting capital at risk here in real estate or equities or starting businesses, it's not a guarantee. You can lose a lot of money, and that's why capital gains should be taxed at a lower rate, a much lower rate, than what your working income is taxed at. They're night and day. So let me give you guys the scenario here on what went down here from what I can put together, all the info I've got here. So Shaughnessy House. The guy bought this house in 2013 for $4.6 million. The house was a 98-year-old house, older house, pretty dilapidated from what I could see. Bought it in 2013. 2 years later, he tried to flip it as is for $13.5 million. So, nutty price. So this kind of is a tell already of where this seller is all about. Bought it for 4.5, tried to flip it for 13.5, which of course there was no comparables for anything like that. So hung on to the house. It didn't go anywhere at 13.5. In 2018 decided, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to completely rebuild this home from the studs up. The only thing, according to the real estate listing, it was 95% rebuilt. So obviously it was probably just the foundation. And he's going to build some infill in the back. They built a large secondary property, not stratified, but it's like a coach house, but a large coach house in the back. But incredible job, beautiful home. I remember when this house came out, it was listed in 2019 for $40 million. And I was shocked when I saw it because I had a house just half a mile away in Shaughnessy that I had listed. A little bit larger house, older original house. I had listed for $10.5 million. So of course I was tracking everything in the Shaughnessy neighborhood that got listed or sold. And I remember when this house hit my hot sheets at $40 million, and I was flabbergasted. I mean, it was a beautiful house. They did an incredible job. I would say, I'm just throwing this out there, I'm going to say it was probably a $10 to $12 million renovation, building the new infill in the back. Again, this house was taken down to with the only original part was, I think, the foundation. So huge money spent, beautifully staged. They did everything right, but I'm not exactly sure what was spent. $10, $12 million, who knows? But listed it at $40 million, which I think was probably, a good, I don't know, $50 million overpriced. They were dreaming on this price. But after that, things went downhill very quickly. COVID hit, of course, in early 2020, and the house, of course, sat, went through 5 realtors here now, kept each realtor for anywhere from 6 months to a year, and then gradually slashed the price. But we're always not one step behind the market. We're probably about 4 or 5 steps behind the market because it had no business being at $40 million to begin with. Probably should have been priced closer to about 20 or 25. And then, of course, market slowed down with COVID. In 2021, the market took off, but not for these type of homes. They took off for 1 bedrooms, 2 beds, detached houses on the east side at $2 million, or out in Tawasin or Richmond. That market picked up, but at this time now, he had it at $38 million or $36 million. The market was still not good here, but it went from there. From 40 million to 39 to 38 to 36 to 34. Then he ran out of rope. In June of 2022, it went into foreclosure. Bank of Montreal was now the new owner. So I don't know all the circumstances. Of course, when it goes into foreclosure, the seller or the owner of the home is no longer able to make the mortgage payments and is usually running anywhere from 3 to 6 months in arrears. They're pretty generous here in Canada. I've done blogs in the past on foreclosures. TD Bank, which I was doing some foreclosures with, they don't want to take it to foreclosure here in Canada. That is an absolute last ditch thing to do. So they generally give these sellers a fair bit of time and leeway. They work with them as much as they can because going into foreclosure is costly. It's expensive to put it in foreclosure. So in June of 2020, it was listed at $29 million, and that's where I can see the rope ended. The ownership shifted from this particular seller to the Bank of Montreal. That was in June of 2022. So it was in foreclosure for almost 2 full years after foreclosure, which again, that's unusual. The foreclosures I sold were, 1 beds, 2 beds, townhomes. They didn't stay in foreclosure all that long. We would generally, when it goes into foreclosure, you try and price it right. And get it into court, get a court date. And how it works is once you get an accepted offer, that accepted offer will be disclosed to potential buyers and they set a court date. And then in court, you have an opportunity to put in a competing offer. But everyone going into court knows what the accepted offer is going into court. But this went from 30 million starting in 2022 to 26 to 23 to the final price of 19.99. And then finally, 2 weeks ago, they had an accepted offer at 15 million. That was announced in the MLS Paragon system, and they announced a court date. I think the court date was something like 5 or 6 weeks later. And at that time, another buyer could step up. The high offer was 15 million going into court, but it did not happen. The offer that went in, that triggered the court date was the final selling price, $15 million. Now, this home is tax assessed at close to 20. Buyer on this, I think, probably got a pretty good deal at $15 million. I think that home is worth $15 million and probably then some. I think this home probably closer to maybe 20, but not 40 where they started. So, again, I think it's a combination of a bunch of things here. I think bad decisions. If they would have just kept this house, this $5 million house, and just kept it until 2022, the guy probably would have walked away with $5, $6, $7 million all day. Or maybe could have flipped it a couple years later for maybe 6.5, but not 13. So maybe a little bit of greed there. Unrealistic expectations probably is what I would call this along the way. Not sure, with the realtors, what they were, not privy to the, what the realtors were saying. I'm sure the realtors he hired were saying, you're overpriced. We'll try it at this price. If it was me, I don't get involved in these type of things. I will take a listing if the seller wants to test the high side within reason. Within reason on this might have been a couple $1 million above where I thought the CMA would have sold. But I would always want an agreement from my seller that, Mr. Seller, after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, if we don't have any serious interest in this, then the market's telling us a story and we should reduce and get in front of this rather than racking up 1,000 days on market total. And every day you rack up on market, once it starts getting up over 200, 300, 400 days, I can tell you that buyers are looking at this with a very critical eye. So there were always 2 or 3 steps behind the market. So it was unrealistic expectations, maybe a little bit being greedy, bad timing. They did the reno and then, of course, unbeknownst to them, COVID hit. So that knocked out a few years. But I just think probably taking on too much, putting 10 or 12 or 13 million dollars into a Shaughnessy home on top of the 5 million you paid. It's risky, and this is why, Mrs. Freeland, you should understand this. There's no guarantees here to capital gains, and people can lose their shirts. And, in this particular situation, I'm not privy to it, but, obviously he was in arrears on the mortgage payments. I'm not sure what his outstanding mortgages were. He would have had a first mortgage when he bought the home, probably, and then had a substantial construction loan mortgage. And so I'm not sure what the difference between what his mortgage was and what the final selling price was. 15 million minus a bunch of court costs, minus another $100,000 in real estate commissions. So whatever deficit is there, which there probably is, in Canada, they will go after this seller for any difference. Now, it depends on what assets this seller has. They can, might want to file for bankruptcy, or who knows. But he lost his shirt on this. So, this is, kind of par for the course here and what can happen on these. For every winner who makes money in real estate, oftentimes there's people that don't hold the home long enough, which I've told you guys, 8 to 10 years is my magic holding period. This guy would have made a boatload of money if he just would have kept the original house and kept it for 10 years. He would have made millions. But then taking on too much, doing in a $10 or $12 million renovation, tough market, putting a lot of capital at risk there. Sometimes it pays off. A lot of times in these kind of situations, it doesn't. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, thanks for watching. See you next week.